right, let's go ahead and get started this morning. We're going to make your way in. Thank you for being here this morning as we continue in our Rooted in God's story. All right, so my question this morning for you, and if you have a story that goes with it, that'd be great too. But the question this morning, kind of playing off the time of year and what's going on, but also it has connections with our story. But I want to hear, what are you afraid of? What are some fears that you have? And if you do have a story, feel free to share. If it's just one word, I'll just repeat it. But if you got a story, raise your hand. I'll bring you the microphone. But I want to hear, what are you afraid of? All right? If you're not willing to share, I'm going to call some people out. What are we afraid of? It could be something. Clowns. Agreed. I'm sure the movie It has nothing to do with that at all. Yeah, clowns. Yeah, there's some people that are really afraid of clowns. All right, what else? What else are we afraid of? Sherry?
A lot, and she had chickens, and I was terrified of a rooster.
Terrified
it
of a
would
rooster.
chase me all around. It was so mean. Rooster.
All right, very good. I can see that. That's understandable. Snakes, yeah. That's on the, I got a list up here, the top one. Snakes is high on that list of the top fears.
I grew up on a lake. No, I grew up on a lake when I was a kid, and we used to jump on the docks to make the snakes scatter before we went swimming.
Ooh.
But now I'm scared to death.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a creek where I was growing up, and yeah, we were always worried about the snakes getting us. Yeah. Public speaking, that's actually the number one of adults. Is they kind of categorize it social phobia, and including that as public speaking. Yeah. So, anybody else have that one? Public speaking? Anyone else? A few of you? Okay.
Mucus.
Mucus? Explain more, Diane.
I'm afraid of mucus.
Mucus. All right. Now we all know how to freak Diane out. That's funny. Anybody else? All right. Alzheimer's, okay, yeah. That's a big one. If you get into, we get into, I guess you could put in mucus with health, but yeah, health issues, yeah, it's a big one. That was a big on the list, on the top list. Any other fears? Sid? Yeah, I think that could go with it, right? Right, yeah. Just our bodies, yeah. What's going on with our bodies? Health issues and Alzheimer's, those are all very real fears. What are some fears we have? Any other fears? And like Sherry, if you want to go back to your childhood, even if maybe you're not afraid anymore, what was something you were just really afraid of? What are some big fears? All right, Lucy, do you need I feel like there's a story with this one.
Has anybody ever heard of this movie, The Mist?
The Mist.
Yeah.
Oh, is that a Stephen King movie?
I have no idea. I was with my birth mother at a friend of hers house, and she had to come get me because I was freaking out and was terrified because this movie, The Mist, killed people. It would suck them in and it killed them.
So she calls me and
So-
says, will you come get me?
Because she would not let me leave. I was stuck at this house, and she was like, no, you're going to sit here and watch this movie. So I had to call her to come pick me up. I was like 6.
So do we still have trauma of mist today when it's a little misty in the
When
mornings?
it's real foggy in the mornings.
We kind of make ourselves
When
back
it's
in the
real
moment.
foggy in the mornings, especially with the
no.
places that I go now for work, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes I'm like, well, this is where I die. But I'm better now for the most part.
It's gotten better. I'm glad it's gotten better since you're 6. Good. All right. And we have any other fears? Big fears. Any other fears we have? Or stories that go with them? All right, let me just run through some of these most common ones. We talked about social phobia or social anxiety, fear of public speaking. A lot of you raise your hand for that one. Do you have another one you want to share, Larry? Okay. What about fear of heights? Anybody afraid of heights in here? We got a few of those. Okay, that was the number 2. Number 3 was the snakes and spiders. Can't remember who said that, but snakes, spiders, bugs fear. I'm not sure what category mucus goes in. We'll find one for you. Number 4 was claustrophobia, enclosed spaces. That one I would be afraid. I haven't really thought about it, but that one would eventually get me for sure. Number 5 was the fear of flying. I know a lot of people that have that, scared of being in an airplane. But the number 6 one, this kind of connects more to what we're going to be talking about, is the fear of darkness. Anybody afraid of darkness, or when you were a kid, we're deathly afraid of darkness? My kids are there. My son has, it is way too bright in there for anyone to be able to sleep, but that's how he sleeps. A few of us were afraid of darkness. So we'll talk about darkness a little bit this morning, but just want to kind of use that to jump into this story, but just to kind of remind us where we're at. We're in Act 4 of the story. We're at the very climax, and now we're on the edge of the climax moment, right? We're in the life of Jesus. We've journeyed from creation to the fall to Israel. Now Jesus has become flesh, dwelt among us. We've talked about his life, his ministry. We've talked about his teachings. Last week we talked about Jesus at the table and the significance of the Lord's Supper. But this week we'll begin to talk about Jesus' arrest, the trial setting. We'll talk about his death and resurrection. We may get more into the resurrection next week, but we really want to talk really on this kind of arrest leading up to his death narrative. Let's go ahead and start in Luke chapter 22, verses 15 through 53. So we're right after the Lord's Supper, which we talked about last week, had the moment, the prayers in the Garden of Gethsemane, and now we're at this moment where chances are we're somewhere between midnight and 12 a.m. and 2 a.m., late hours or early morning hours, however you want to look at it. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns." I don't know, but I've never focused on that line before. I want to focus on it a little bit this morning, this understanding the hour when darkness reigns. Now, the word used for hour here it can be used both literally and figuratively. It can literally mean an actual hour, or it can mean more of just this time, your hour, your time. This is a time of darkness where darkness reigns. And this is what we're going to see. It kind of encapsulate, I would even take the beginning of this darkness reigning tower, maybe started that when Judas betrays Jesus, or maybe the darkness reign starts right after the Lord's Supper, where Jesus is agonizing over what is to come. He's praying to God. Somewhere around in that time period is when this hour began, but we know it kind of ends at this moment, right? Skip to the next chapter, Luke chapter 23, verse 44, "And it was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land." I wouldn't say ended here, but continued in this moment. We see it referenced again. "It was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. For the sun stopped shining, the curtain of the temple was torn in two. And Jesus called out with a loud voice, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' And when he had said this, he breathed his last." So you see darkness coming, announced, hey, we're in this dark hour at the arrest of Jesus, and darkness at the death of Jesus. The hour where darkness reigned. And I kind of want to use that motif a little bit. And like I mentioned, it was more than an actual hour. In fact, what do you kind of surmise was the time period between Jesus' arrest and Jesus' death? Anybody have a good idea on that? Huh? Yeah, it's around, depending on when he was arrested, it's between 12 to 15 hours, which a lot happens in that 12 to 15 hours, right? It's estimated that he was arrested sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. At dawn that day, there would have been a series of rapid trials. All that kind of happens, boom, boom, boom. It's around 9 a.m. where Jesus is scourged and then nailed to the cross. And then Jesus enters this moment, it dies at around 3 p.m., right? You're talking somewhere between 12 to 14, 12 to 15 hours where a lot happens. This hour of darkness, a period where Jesus used the words where darkness reigns. And so I want to look at some of the things that happen in this in-between period, but kind of using this motif of darkness and light, okay? So here's what I want us to kind of recognize. When darkness reigns, and I'm kind of bringing darkness back all the way to the betrayal of Judas. You could say it's at the moment of rest. You could say it's the moment of his time in Gethsemane. But here's kind of what I would say. Here's some things we see happen when darkness reigns. Good people fail to pray. Remember that moment after the Lord's Supper with his disciples, with his apostles, and he goes up to pray, and what does he tell them? I want you to stay up and watch for me and pray with me. Yet they continue to fail to do so. Good people fail to pray. Friends betray friends. One of Jesus' 12 followers, one of his closest people, one of his closest friends betrays him. When darkness reigns, swords are drawn. We all know this moment, not only the swords of the Roman guard, but who else draws a sword? Peter, all right? Bonus points. What does he do with the sword? Yeah, all right. Whose ear does it cut off? You might know the name of the soldier? Man, y'all are good Church of Christ folks, I tell you, man. Y'all know your stuff. Y'all have been good at Bible Bowl. All right. We see when darkness reigns, disciples deny their teacher. Okay? We see this moment where, again, Peter denies Jesus 3 times, just like Jesus said he would. We see that when darkness reigns, the innocent are convicted. Even Pontius Pilate say, I don't know what this guy did wrong. But they want him crucified. They want him out. Not only that, but the guilty are released. Sorry, I left off the Y there. The guilty are released. Who's released? Anybody know that guy's name? Barabbas, absolutely, yeah. Someone that was guilty is released. The law is subverted for power control. We can see this on the government side. We can see this with the Sadducees and Pharisees, how we subvert the law for power and control. The righteous are mocked. You go through and you read about the beatings Jesus took, the things they say about Jesus, how they put, here is the King of the Jews, look at your King. Jesus is mocked as he's being beaten and as he's nailed to the cross. Women weep over the loss of the children. We see this moment of darkness where we see Jesus' own mother at the cross weeping over Jesus. Soldiers demean and torture others. Okay? All right, so we see all these things. We also see these, I think that's all of them. Oh, one more. And the condemned insult one another. We see as on the cross. All right, so we see all these things. I also want to see that kind of is more of a theme. Is more of not what's just happened this moment, but what happens when darkness reigns in general. Now, you could say a lot of these are specific, but a lot of these also kind of convert to when darkness reigns today, right? When darkness reigns today, good people fail to pray. When darkness reigns today, friends betray friends. When darkness reigns today, swords are drawn. When darkness reigns today, disciples deny their teacher. When darkness reigns today, the innocent are convicted and the guilty are released. When darkness reigns today, the law is subverted for power and control. When darkness reigns today, the righteous are mocked. When darkness reigns today, women weep over the loss of their children, and soldiers demean and torture others. When righteous reigns today, the condemned insult one another. I think a lot of us look around and say, man, we see some of this, right? We feel some of this, all right? But the good news of Jesus is from the beginning, we see that Jesus, from the beginning. I love the way John's gospel starts. He talks about in the beginning was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And Jesus was with God in the beginning, right? That's John chapter 1. And the next line, just after that, is John chapter 1, verse 4 and 5 says this, in him was life, and that light was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So 2 things in this. One, we see... that's not written right. Not only will the darkness not win, right, but Jesus shines light in the midst of the darkness to reveal his kingdom. Okay? Not only is light going to overcome the darkness, as we see in verse 5, but I think what we get to see through Jesus is his light shining in the midst of darkness in order to reveal his kingdom. So I want to look at some of the actions of Jesus, and we'll get also to Simon the Cyrene, but mostly the actions of Jesus and how his kingdom is actually revealed and how he shines light in the midst of the darkness. And this is all in this Good Friday, this moment, this hour of darkness, this reign of darkness moment from around the time where Judas betrays him to the death of Jesus, okay? Though darkness reigns, kingdom people refuse to use the sword even when threatened. Jesus says, no more of this. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people pursue the will of God despite the consequences. As Jesus says, yet not my will, but yours be done. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people confidently anticipate with hope the fulfillment of kingdom, as Jesus says, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people weep for the brokenness of the world rather than over their own suffering for the sake of the kingdom. As Jesus says, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people forgive their persecutors. As Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people invite others into the kingdom. As Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people trust in God's work despite the reign of darkness. As Jesus says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And then last one here. Though darkness reigns, kingdom people follow Jesus. They, like Simon from Cyrene, pick up their cross and follow him. So we see all these moments. Darkness is reigning. Jesus says, hey, your hour, hey, this is your hour. But Jesus, even in the midst of all the darkness is going on, people betraying him, his own friends, his own followers betraying, his own followers denying him, Jesus is revealing the light of the kingdom in the midst of darkness. And I think this has a lot for us. Okay? Here's the biggest thing I want us to see this morning. Darkness reigned on Good Friday, but the kingdom of God also broke into that darkness. And even as darkness reigns in our day, we, as kingdom people, are called to follow Jesus, even though doing so may take us to a cross. Right? Now we know what that may not look like, but we have the same understanding that darkness reigns today. Okay? Well, I don't want to get too much in this. I want to leave it to us. All right? So we got a few questions we answer every week. I wanted to spend a little time teaching, but a lot of time discussing, unpacking. If we need to go back to some of these, we can. But what does Good Friday fit into the story? What is this moment where Jesus says, hey, this is your hour, darkness reigns? This moment where things just seemingly go behind, right? If you're the enemy reading this story, things look like they're going exactly as you intended. The enemy feels he's about to be victorious. Jesus is going to his death. The hero of the story is about to die. Darkness reigns. I don't know if you've seen the movie Passion of Christ. I mean, you probably have. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and I probably wouldn't agree with everything and how it's portrayed in the movie. But one thing I do remember about that movie is this moment. If you've seen the movie from the moment where he's arrested to the moment of his death, there's just a different complexion. It's just a darker. You remember I remember they just sat with me just how dark everything was. They just tried to portray this moment, and it's just dark the entire time. Not just because it's nighttime, because they wanted you to feel that darkness. They wanted you to just be in just the hurt and the pain of the darkness. And go back and watch that. The first third of that movie is just dark. Like just literally the light of the movie is dark. And so I think we feel that, right? And we sense that in the story. But what does that mean in the story? That there was an hour of darkness, but even in the midst of that, Jesus is revealing the light of his kingdom. And of course, we know what comes next. But even in this moment, I want to sit with this moment for now. What can we understand? What can we come to know about God? What can we come to know about ourselves from Good Friday, from the darkness? And how does it invite us to participate in his kingdom, right? Yes, Sunday's coming, resurrection's coming, we're going to get there, but what can this teach us? All right, Ron? Coming to you.
You know, as bad as things get throughout history and what we think we're living through now, it is humankind's worst day. I mean, it's that period, that 12, 14, 16 hours, it is humankind's worst of the worst.
Good. Yeah. Darkest moment in history. I would definitely agree with that. All right. Let's go ahead and feel free, even if yours doesn't fit within these questions or if you don't feel like it does, if you haven't, please share. But let's go ahead and jump into some of this. What does this tell us about God? What is Good Friday? What is this reign of darkness? What does this tell us about God? There could be a lot of answers here. Yeah, Mike. Or maybe what questions does it give you about God? Maybe that's one thing.
This tells us that God is not afraid to encounter darkness head on, to take the fight to the darkness.
I like that, Mike. To face darkness head on. It's good. Other thoughts? Yeah, Sherry?
The first thing that came to my mind is that it just tells us he was there. He was present. You know, Jesus pleaded, "Don't forsake me."
Yeah.
But this is just, to me, further evidence that he was present.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was working in it, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah, he's present. God is working. I mean, this isn't, there's all the seasons of darkness we've seen throughout the story of God, and there's been some, right? Those 400 years of silence, we talked about that. The years in the wilderness, the years in slavery. I mean, there's been seasons of darkness throughout the story of God, but every single time, what have we seen, right? God is always present in the darkness. God is always working in the darkness. And it seems just after the darkness, what happens? God does something big, right? God either after the darkness brings his people into the promised land. God rescues his people in the most miraculous ways you've ever seen. He goes from 400 years in silence, and then boom, Jesus is here. Now we see 12, 15 hours of silence, darkness. What happens? Well, we know what happens next. God is doing something really big in this moment, okay? What else does this tell us about God? Or like I said, what questions maybe does this give you about God? Either way. We could go either way with this. Yeah, God had a plan. Jan said this reveals God's plan for us. Very good. Yeah. This moment, while in the grand scheme, is it surprising the hero of the story just died? That is not how stories are written, right? That's not how this is supposed to go. Well, you read the Old Testament, you read some of these prophecies, well, maybe it was. It is God's plan. It was God's plan, yeah.
So I'm spending a lot of time in the Gospel of Mark right now. In Gospel of Mark, the crucifixion and death is equated to the glorification of Jesus. It's not the resurrection, it's the crucifixion. It's the culmination of the mission. And you see in the Gospel of Mark that the work of Satan is to prevent this from happening, prevent the crucifixion of Jesus, to instead have Jesus crowned as king, recognized as king by the crowds, to tempt Jesus with that, to have Peter tempt him with it. And Jesus continues to say, no, that is not the path. This is the path. The glorification of Christ is the death of Christ.
Yeah.
It's where he comes into reigning, and the path, the way of Christ that he expects us to follow is a similar path of self-sacrifice in love for people who don't deserve it. And that story, that ending of the Gospel of Mark is, there's a guy named Tim Gambas who says, one of the big failures of modern Christianity is that we so desperately want to be on the winning side that we can't embrace that Jesus chose to lose from a human perspective to win. And that he calls us to do the same thing. That it was the whole plan through the prophets, that it was the whole plan through the Gospels. You know, it's so hard for me to wrap my arms around that because I want so desperately for Sunday to be the thing that was the culmination, but it was really Friday.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, just based on your thoughts, one thing that I would say, that means God's ways are better, right? God's ways are higher. To think that, the subversion of God's plan would be to make Jesus great and king and elevated, which in our mind is victory, was actually the opposite. Would have done the opposite. Yeah.
Jen, there was some song on Way FM or something this morning we were listening to coming over here, and we were it was something about being fragile, being fragile in your time of struggles. And she was comparing it to the power of God on the cross. And we think about the cross being fragile, but along kind of what Todd's saying there, I mean, the power was shown by staying on the cross and dying on the cross. Yeah. And it wasn't fragile, it was power.
That's good. And that even goes back to something we mentioned earlier when we were talking about Jesus' spiritual formation, right? The two moments where we would say Jesus was at his weakness, Jesus was at his strength. One was when he was in the wilderness, and the other was when he was in the promised land. And we see that Jesus' spiritual formation, right? The two moments where we would say Jesus was at his weakness, Jesus was at his strength. One was when he was in the wilderness, and the other was when he was in the promised land. And we see that Jesus' spiritual formation, right? The two moments where we would say Jesus was at his weakness, Jesus was at his strength. is in the desert when he was hungry, which we say, well, looking back, that was a moment of power. That's the moment where he's spending time 40 days fasting with God. And we would say, yeah, that's a moment of weakness. He's nailed on a cross. That's a moment of weakness. No, that's a moment of power. I think that's interesting. Very good.
Yeah, I think we typically think that Satan thinks he's winning through that whole process.
Yeah.
But I tend to think Satan knows he's losing.
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously knows that God can raise Jesus from the dead. You know, what would victory for Satan look like? I think it would have something to do with separating him from God, challenging Jesus to the point that he questions God or curses God and dies or whatever. But he knows that he hasn't broken Jesus. Mm-hmm. And even as Ron says, Satan gave him the worst, and he came out standing, even though he died. Yeah. And so that's where I see, again, the power of goodness, the power of love for God, the relationship that Jesus and God had was not broken. Mm-hmm. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, power in the death. Yeah, it's hard for us to wrap our brains around sometimes. Yeah, Steve?
Mine is partly a question and partly a statement, but given that God knew that his creation would rebel and that he would suffer at the hands of his creation, he still created us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. I think it tells us a lot about God, right? All right, let's go on to that. Very good discussion on that. Lots to learn there. What does this tell us about humanity? Let's kind of look at this from a human level. What does this tell us about us as humans? Think about some of those things that happen when darkness reigns. What does this tell us about ourselves? Yeah, Lucy?
I think it just shows, like, everybody kept saying that it was his time of power, even though he was going through the hardest. But, random little medical thing, you grow more at night than you do during the day. And I've always been told that God will never give you more than what you can handle. Sometimes you just have to find the window. But you can always find your way through it if you just trust in him. And that's, Jesus knew he was still going to be okay. He knew that was where he was meant to be at the time.
Okay, yeah. So growth in seasons of darkness and trials, yeah, we definitely see that in this and throughout the story of God. Absolutely, we learn that about humanity. We grow in the struggle, in the darkness. God is working in us and grows us through that. What else? What else can we learn about humanity through this moment? Yeah, Sharon.
Just thought about not having the pridefulness of saying, oh, well, I would never do that. But in seasons of darkness, I just think about Peter, you know, and that things that we thought we would never do, we may do them in seasons of darkness.
Yeah, I think that's the reality of humanity we got to look like, as these guys were with Jesus 3 years, mentored by him, discipled by him. And when the going gets tough, who they look out for? Themselves. Yeah. Sometimes when things get tough, even though I would say, man, did they believe Jesus? They trust Jesus? I mean, did they have their doubts and struggles? Absolutely. But things got tough. They really struggled. They were looking out for themselves first, it seemed. And I think that reveals a characteristic of humanity to us, I think. What else? Tom?
Well, just in general, our idea of the path is oftentimes completely different than the path that God takes.
Yeah.
And the importance of faith and faithfulness during times of darkness, because it just doesn't make sense sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. God's ways are very different than ours, and his ways are better. That's all throughout this story. Sorry, Toby.
I think whenever someone comes to see God, they know it. So like two things, just with, the crucifixion, the criminal on the cross, I mean, he knew.
Yeah.
He knew he was God. The centurion, hey, this man was the Son of God. I mean, whenever, it says the Holy Spirit will reveal God to people. It's not just what we say. I mean, the Holy Spirit works. I mean, when people see the power of God, they know it. They know it. So I think, not good for humanity that we're a sinful nature, but when we see God working, then you have no other choice but to proclaim it. And that's how everyone ever saw Jesus or God, like the angel. I mean, people would always acknowledge when they see it. So.
Good. Very good. One thing I was kind of thinking of is just how easily swayed humanity is on the side. You kind of picture of that moment he's riding into Jerusalem and they're proclaiming his name, they're bowing down, and Jesus is the King, Jesus is the Lord. And then it's the mob mentality that goes the exact opposite way. Crucify him, crucify him. Like, how does a crowd get so easily swayed? And is that not our culture? We can be swayed one side, a generation changes, and they're swayed to we're just kind of ebbs and flow, but there's no deep conviction of, no, this is Jesus. This is who I'm going to follow. We struggle with deep convictions, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Of struggling, this is it. And I think it's hard. This could go opposite ways, but I do see that, just kind of that mob mentality. And we see humanity go the wrong way with mob mentality all the time. Okay, anything else on humanity? A lot of great points. All right, last question, important question. Bring this to your story. How does your story come into this? How does this invite us to participate in the story of God? So we talk about the hour when darkness reigns and how Jesus lived into that.
I guess it invites us into God's story that helps us realize that when we feel like we are in darkness and our lives are engulfed by darkness, to just keep going. That the darkness is not going to last forever, and that we see in all these examples throughout history that God wins.
That's right.
And that's the side that we hang on to even when we're in the darkness, to keep on. As my dad used to say over and over, just keep on keeping on.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the story. It's like we know the ending. God wins. As you mentioned, the light is going to overcome the darkness. But kind of going back to humanity, the reality is darkness still reigns sometimes, right? We feel that, we see it. There's still darkness in the world. We're in this already but not yet state. We'll talk about that in the future, but this is where we're at in the story. Darkness is still a reality. The victory's already been won. And so we know this, but kind of to add on to your point, the beauty is some of the biggest moments of revealing God's kingdom is we have those opportunities in what seasons? In darkness. When we step into a moment where everyone says, man, you should just give up, life is terrible, but we step into it with faith and clarity and trust in God, that's when the world looks at that and says, well, that's different, right? And so we have moments, we have opportunities even, whether we would ever want this darkness to come on us or not, to step into that in really faithful ways that are going to reveal light in a bigger way than we ever could have. And I think that's not easy, but that's a reality. I think it's a way to step in the story. Very good. All right, other thoughts on this? How do we participate in the story of God? How does this invite us? How does this invite you? How does it invite you, even specifically, to participate in God's story?
Well, I'm not sure if it's specifically, but I think, there was an hour of darkness, but there was general darkness over the land the whole time Jesus was living. And he shined into the light, and he was not overcome by the light. And I think for me personally, sometimes I have trouble living in a world that, that just, whether it gets on my nerves, it wears on me. You can become cynical, you can become pessimistic, you can become jaded. And Jesus didn't do that. And so to continue to walk, acknowledging the darkness, it's just to turn our back and pretend it's not there. That's no good either. But to live in hope and assurance and with a certain, just more like Jesus. I don't know how to say that. It's just.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we can know. Here's the hardship: is we can know this truth, right? That light wins, light overcomes the darkness. That God wins in this. But we live in this reality where darkness still reigns. We can still have two different approaches to that. One approach could be hey, this world is dark. I can't stand it. I'm just going to bid my time, and then I know this is coming. Or there's this other part. Well, that's not how Jesus lived his life in the midst of darkness. He was going to shine this light. So how are we going to adapt into that? Are we going to bring light into the darkness and reveal the great light, or just, hey, let me just get through this terrible time on earth and try to make it to my reward, right? I think that's an important perspective, important thing to think through. Yeah.
So I think part of this is to tell us to share the story.
Sure.
We were commissioned to do that, so for sure we ought to tell that's how it invites me to participate in the story of God. Yeah.
One of the best ways to bring light is to share the light, right? Yeah, that's the way to spread the light. Very good. All right, any other thoughts? All right, thank you guys for sharing. Again, like we mentioned, we're going to jump into resurrection tomorrow. A lot of implications with the resurrection. Excited for that. And then we'll kind of get into maybe one or two more lessons on Jesus, and then we'll begin to the beginnings of the church, and we'll continue marching along in God's story and finding our ways through it. Thanks again for your thoughts and questions. If you do have more questions, please let me know. Love to talk more with you about those. Thank you, guys.